Cuba is an island nation in the Caribbean Sea with a turbulent history which has been ruled by the Communist Party since 1965. Now, countries export lots of things, from basic necessities like food to raw materials and complex machinery. The world trades an awful lot. One thing you might not expect to be part of such a system, however, is medical personnel. In this case, specifically medical doctors. Now, Cuba's GDP per capita is around $12,000, which ranks it the 88th country in the world. But among the many economic markers, there is one oddity. Cuba's life expectancy is almost 79 years at birth. This is on par with the United States, a far richer country, and far higher than countries such as South Africa and Mongolia, which have a similar GDP per capita when adjusted for purchasing power parity. So, what is this whole deal with exporting medical personnel? Well, Cuba has a medical international program. In short, Cuba sends medical personnel overseas to disaster-struck areas as well as low-income countries that cannot provide the necessary medical services themselves. In 2019, more than 30,000 Cuban doctors were active overseas in more than 67 countries, and Bloomberg reported that the program was estimated to make around $8 billion, which is more than the revenue from tourism and exports of raw materials in Cuba combined. So why does Cuba do this? The program was started in the 1960s, and it is frequently described by critics as doctor diplomacy, basically saying that Cuba uses these doctors for diplomatic goals as much as it does humanitarian ones. The beginning of the programs can be traced to the 1960s, in which Cuba created a foreign policy program with the aim to send to help countries in their anti-colonialist struggles. Cuba sent doctors to Algeria during the Algerian War of Independence, when France pulled out its medical personnel, leaving Algeria with a shortage. Similarly, it supported Guinea-Bissau with medical personnel in its struggle for independence from Portugal. Cuba has also sent medical personnel to countries after various natural disasters. For example, it has sent medical personnel to Chile, Nicaragua, and Iran following earthquakes, to Honduras, Guatemala, and Haiti after various hurricanes, to Sri Lanka and Indonesia after the 2004 tsunami, and even more recently to countries such as Italy and Andorra during the worst months of the coronavirus pandemic. Now, there is quite some criticism of this program. One of the criticisms is that Cuba does this only for financial gain. As mentioned before, the program brings in more money than tourism and the export of raw materials combined. Human Rights Watch and other organizations and countries have accused Cuba of human rights violations, in the sense that some of the work that the doctors have been doing may amount to forced labor. And another argument often used is that Cuba uses these doctors for geopolitical gain, and that the program is much more of a diplomatic or soft power program rather than a humanitarian one. Of course, human rights concerns should be taken seriously, and of course Cuba also benefits diplomatically from its efforts. But this is no different from the way the US and other rich countries benefit from giving development aid. To put that as the central motivation of the program is an incredibly cynical view, often argued by critics of Cuba such as the United States. And this understates and undermines the enormous amount of good Cuban doctors and other medical professionals have done in the countries that they've visited. So what does drive this program? What is going on here? Whether the Cuban Revolution and the implementation of its ideals was successful is open to debate, but the Cuban healthcare system has been incredibly successful in raising its life expectancy to be on par with far wealthier countries than itself. And this healthcare system is built on 4 principles: that the care is free, it is universally accessible, it is provided by the state, and that healthcare is a human right. And these principles are also the animating principles of the Medical International Program. So what have Cuban doctors done in this period? Well, Cuban doctors have done over 1.2 billion overseas consultations in disaster-struck areas and low-income countries. They've attended 2.2 million births and performed 8 million overseas surgeries. These were all performed in disaster-struck areas or countries that were in severe need of medical service. Cuba has sent more medical personnel overseas than all of the 7 largest economies combined. Of course, Cuba benefits from this in terms of finances and soft power diplomacy, but the real positive effects of its program on the lives of the people in disaster-struck areas or areas with poor medical services should take center stage. There is much the world can learn in terms of global health cooperation from Cuba.